I signed this book a couple minutes ago because I knew that I would be here now. And I wanted to give it to you and to Esther. And
you would give it to one of the girls there, there's a greater likelihood that she will get back with it.
Yes. And the reason I want to give you this book is it's been 4 years since I've been here. And 4 years ago, I sat in this chair as well. And I haven't been here for the last 4 years because the most amazing thing has transpired in my life. 3 years ago, almost to the day, February the 19th, my youngest daughter was in Colombia, South America, helping to build schools and do all kinds of amazing things. And she was randomly crushed by a boulder. So I know it's kind of sounds unusual probably to most people to hear that I've had an amazing 3 years. And yet it is thanks to you and to your teaching. So I got the call, and of course my natural reaction was to be devastated and have all these horrible negative emotions. And yet it was then that the brilliance of the universe and the process began in everything. And I've been listening to you now for 10, 15 years, and I've lived your words. So the beauty of the process was that it didn't happen in Tampa, where I live. It was in Colombia. So I had to fly, and there's no better place to talk to God, universe, source, myself in something like this than 30,000 feet. And what I came back to was you and your teaching. And I thought it's either real or it's not real. And I know that there have been areas of my life where I've tried to apply it and I've had lots of resistance and haven't always had the great results. But all of a sudden, a lot of the things that I had asked you about, things that I didn't understand and I couldn't feel grateful for, I tried, but it was so hard, or it felt so hard, that was my story, became beautiful. Because like you just said up here, it was as if I hadn't lived through those, first of all, I never would have been called to you to find your book, which literally Ask It Is Given fell off a bookshelf in a completely the wrong part of the store for me. And of course I picked it up and I opened it in the middle, as I always do, and I started reading it and I was hooked. And the first event I came to, I was shocked because you were channeling. Because no one told me that you were going to be channeling. And it would have terrified me had I known. So here I was, years later, and I was on this plane, and I went back, and I realized that the horrible things, quote unquote, if I hadn't reacted exactly the way that I had, I would not have been in this perfect place to be the perfect person to be my daughter's mom at that point. And I was able, thanks to your teaching, to look at that and go, so if that story, if I hadn't understood at the time when I lived through it, the magnificence of the contrast and what it was guiding me toward, the path of least resistance to help me evolve and become who I ultimately was now, then what else wasn't I seeing? And in this moment with the boulder that had crashed onto my daughter, and they were telling me that they were going to try to keep her alive long enough for me to come and say my goodbyes, what else could be possible? And so I was able to creep my way from devastation to hope, to belief. And then I remembered you saying that it's as easy to create a castle as it is a button, or a button as a castle. And I thought, if we're only scratching the surface of what we're capable of creating, then why not create a sense that anything's possible, everything's possible, and that my daughter will be fine, but whatever fine means, because I would never make her life, I went back to something else you'd said, that I would never make her life, the whole beauty of her life, be reduced to her having lived so that I would define myself as the mother of a child who'd been killed by a boulder at an early age. And so I began to work my way by one thought that feels better, just one tiny little thought that feels just a little bit better. And I inched my way to this incredible place where belief became an expectation, and this expectation became such a knowing. It began to look to everyone around us as if life had to conform to my vision. So when I got to the ICU in Colombia, I was in a place, and this may sound totally bizarre, but I was happier and more at peace, even though my daughter was supposedly dying, than I had ever been, because it was almost as if Source had picked me up and taken me 5 years ahead, or however many years ahead. It almost seemed like time had no more meaning at that, not the way that I had been looking at it. And that there was it was like a spider web. When you walk out the door, at first you don't see it, and then you take one step and there's this magical web that's more beautiful than anything you've ever seen. And then you can take another step and it's completely invisible to everyone else around it. And that's what it felt like. And so I had a lot of people around the world who were concerned about Skylar. And so I thought I would, since I had limited way to communicate, that I would create this little page on Facebook called Sky is the Limit, but spelled like her name. So, and I thought it would be communicating to about 100, people around the world. But I very much wanted it to be inspired more like what you have taught me. So rather than have it be a journal of misery about Skylar and oh my God, I thought, what if all the energy of these people can be directed, inspired, guided to have the visualization of her, not as some young woman who's fighting for her life, but Skylar is about love and life and laughter and strong and brilliant and destined for greatness, whatever that means, whether she's physically alive or whether it's her memory that spurs that on. And so all of a sudden we had thousands and thousands of followers, and things that looked miraculous to other people became our norm. And so Sky made it. She made it. So I have become her 24/7 caregiver, because where the boulder hit is where the doctors say that the balance is typically paths through our brains. Now, to one extent, I believe that it's irrelevant whether she is able to traditionally walk or traditionally be physically independent the way many of us are ever again. And yet, the brilliant thing of it is that, well, her middle name means happiness in Japanese, and she truly is. And she and I live in such joy and happiness, and it's almost as if there's this whirlwind that has helped us reach out to people around the world. Now I have been asked to speak at the hospital, actually, where in Jackson, where she was cared for. We're actually going back and speaking, and so we have, this book is actually the compilation of the actual posts that I wrote, and you will see how much you touched our lives and the lives of you touched millions and millions of people. But this is, to me, this book, my daughter's life, the joy and wonder that I feel in my life is such a gift from you. And now, I guess our question, because my daughter is here, but she didn't think that she could actually be in here, is we love our life. Now, I mean, it sounds crazy, but we love, every morning I wake up, I love my life. And so how can I be the most empowering mother and guide to this young woman who still has more?
We have some questions for you. Do you mind?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd love that.
This is the most significant thing that we want to ferret out here and explore a little bit with you, because we think that as we ask these questions that the answers will come easily to you, because where you stand vibrationally and the degree to which you are in the receiving mode will make it easy for you to feel the bigger picture. We want to ask some things in order to help you really bridge where you stand and who you both really are. So this is the most significant question. We have said for quite a long while that no matter what someone is creating, whether it is a relationship or an empire, doesn't matter what the subject is, that the majority of the creation happens before the first board is hammered with the first nail. And today, we have been talking about getting out ahead of it, rather than standing where you are and coping or even bouncing off where you are or even cleaning up energy about where you are. While that is certainly a wonderful thing, and life comes at you and it is what it is, and what you do next is more up to you, as you have proven, than anyone really understands. But even in those incremental raising of vibrations, there is something that is massively more powerful, and that is getting out ahead of it. To use the former analogy, the reason that your empire is created or your relationship is created before the physical things come into place, the reason that most of it is done before that, is because in that dreaming state, there is no reality to tend to. So, because of the information that had been given to you, you, without even knowing that you'd done it, left a big gap between now reality, and while you were at 30,000 feet, you got out ahead of it. It was, as you well know, such a wonderful thing that you weren't right up there in the beginning of it, that there was time and space between what everyone was calling the now reality and the reality that you were forming in your mind. You are maybe the best example that we've seen so far of someone who was able, in really astonishingly devastating circumstances, to get out ahead of it. So you got out ahead of it and accomplished so much. So our question to you is, are you still out ahead of it? Because it's easier to be out ahead of it when there's no reality to face, when there's nothing to see, when there's nothing to compensate for. And so from our perspective, that is your work, to stay out ahead of it. So a lot of people would see a recovery like this as a message of triumphing over terrible circumstances or overcoming. But there is a trap in overcoming, because what you are overcoming is in the mix, where when you're out ahead of it in your dream state, there is nothing to overcome. There's just this pure energy that you're identifying and drinking the sweet nectar of, that is establishing paths. In other words, if this universe at large can reach into the quagmire and out of the chaos accomplish clarity, can that not happen in any circumstance?
Yes.
So when you know that, and you know so much, then there's something really fun about that. Now, here's the next important thing. Can you imagine or get on board with the idea of tasting the sweet nectar of getting out ahead of it connection for the singular purpose of tasting the sweet nectar?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
With no mindful determination to change immediate outcomes. If it can be about how delicious it is to get out ahead of it, rather than the ulterior motive of getting out ahead of it so that I can accomplish this, now you're free. Now you're free of all resistance. And of course, that has been your story, your dominant story, right from the beginning in all of this, because that's why it has come along as it has. But this is a story about energy and a story about emotion, and it is a story about cause and effect. But humans are so quick to want to focus on the effect that has been accomplished because of the cause, and we want you to let go of any effect that you're trying to accomplish, any ulterior motive that you're trying to accomplish, and just focus on the sweetness of the tasting of the nectar of alignment for the simplicity of the sweetness of the tasting of the nectar of alignment.